It is a tremendous pleasure to welcome Jessie Brown to this podcast. She is a musician and a vocal coach based in Toronto, Canada. How are you today, Jessie? Thank you for joining me.
I'm I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right, and
That's great.
I'm glad to be here in your company.
Oh, ditto.
Thank you. So, tell us about the music scene of Toronto where you belong.
Well, I haven't lived in Toronto since I think 2020.
Mhm.
Toronto was actually it was a brief moment in time which I loved, but it was the worst time I could have had. I had moved there from Halifax, Nova Scotia,
Mhm.
very further East Coast Canada. And I had had a music career in Halifax for about 10 years when I decided to move to Toronto because I wanted to have more session work, more available work for a bigger city. And I moved in 2019 and I started to get a band together. I was doing some writing. I was starting to work with some producers on what do they call it? Byline writing, like session writing for people. It was going really well, and then people started talking about this virus that was going around, and some people were starting to get sick, and then COVID-19 happened, and the whole city shut down. And so at that point, I was living in Toronto with two other roommates in a two-bedroom apartment during lockdown with no work,
Mhm.
teaching online. So my Toronto experience was very brief and very confined. I loved it there, but I wish I would have had more of a chance. It was exciting and much bigger than what I was used to, and by that point, the music scene had just died. And so it's been interesting. Since then, um, I found my partner, my long term partner in Toronto, and then eventually brought him back to Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
Um, and so I lived in Nova Scotia for about 2 years from 2020 to 2022. And I've just finished traveling for the last 8 months with my partner throughout Mexico and Europe. And now he is in his home in New Zealand, and I'm waiting for my visa so I can join him there. I'm just
Oh,
in
wow.
New Brunswick, Canada now. I'm all over the
Mhm.
place.
Mhm. So you plan to move to New Zealand in coming months, right?
I do, yeah. Visa allowing. Yes, I hope to be there very soon.
Wow, that's a big move.
Yeah, yeah. The other side of the world. I couldn't have picked a further place to go.
Mhm. Okay. So, do you suppose you will be continuing your musical work there?
Yes, well, the fun part, like my partner is originally from New Zealand, and so the nice thing about that is that he is a music lover and has a lot of information about what the scene, quote unquote, is like in. We're going to be in Auckland, one of the
Mhm.
major cities there in New Zealand, and so I'm very excited to get to know an entirely new scene, work my way up again into whatever recording, performing, teaching scenario I can get into. I've been very fortunate though that because of the pandemic, my teaching, I was able to refine it. I was able to go back and do a new pedagogy online that I couldn't afford in person, and then I was able to start teaching virtually and have continued to do so so that no matter where I've traveled, I can continue with my clients. So I've been teaching music this entire time,
That's
right
awesome.
here on Zoom.
Mhm. So, had it not been for COVID-19, would you still be staying in Toronto?
I think so. I think I would have been. I mean, that is to say that I wanted to build a career there. Uh, I know that my partner eventually, the reason that we were traveling was his Canadian work visa had run out. So I
Mhm.
don't know what circumstances would be like at this point in Toronto if he no longer was able to live in Canada. I feel like I still would have chose love. But yeah, I would have still been working on staying in Toronto. I still have lots of musician friends that are there too. Oh,
So, how did a New Zealander found himself in Canada and Toronto, to be specific?
I think he was a traveler at heart. in the beginning and was just trying to find any way he could, I think at the time, to explore the world. And so first he had taken a job in the US as a sailing instructor, I think, for a pretty large summer camp. And so he had a brief visa that the summer camp would pay for him to do, which was his out, I guess. And then he wanted to be able to travel the world before he came home again. And when I met him, he's a chef. He's a trained chef, and he was working in Toronto. And then the night that I met him, he was in a small bar that my roommate musician friend bartended. He was wearing a gold robe. He looked like Willy Wonka. He had a stack of chocolate bars from New Zealand, and he talked to me for an hour about how that night he was celebrating because he perfected his favorite chicken stock. Which is, for some reason, it worked. It got me. But he, at that point, was still looking to keep traveling. So he was in Canada because the visa was easier to get than the US, which who knows? But as a Commonwealth country, I'm sure it was easier for him to go into another Commonwealth country, right? So
Right, yes.
when that happened and the pandemic happened, we were both there, with what our original dreams were kind of paused, and then we just adapted to whatever was happening. And so for him, when I asked if he was interested in seeing another part of Canada, i.e., my home in Nova Scotia, he was interested because to him that was just another new thing to explore, which worked out well for both of us. And then I was able to kind of tap back into the music scene there and had lots of music to do when I got home, which was nice to know after trying to find anything in the city where everything was much more locked down than Nova Scotia.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, best of luck with your move to New Zealand if you do get a chance to.
Thank you. Oh, it's gonna happen. It's happening.
Yeah, it's where the musician Lord is from, so you know.
Yes, and Kimbra. Are you familiar with Kimbra?
Not as familiar with her as I should, but are you?
Ooh. Oh, I love her. She's in New York now, sadly. I mean, good for her, but I love her. I was really hoping that she would still be in that scene in Auckland, but I'm sure it's very small compared to what Lord and Kimbra are used to. But
Mhm.
yeah, some great musicians over there. I'm very excited, and apparently the music scene is very supportive. Um, I'm excited to meet them. I'm also excited that uh, because it seems geographically quite small for where it is, that maybe I'll have a better chance of meeting everyone that I want to meet in terms of session musicians or recording artists.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Have you been before?
I haven't. No, the farthest I've traveled so far is Western Europe.
Hmm. Yeah. So tell me about your European trip.
Okay. Well, the first time I went to Europe, I was hired by some German clients to sing. They'd flown me over. I actually thought it was a fake account. I was like, oh, this is Ed McMahon or something. I've won the lottery, but I had a cold I had a cold email from some very sweet Germans that sent a message. They were like, we would like to hire you to sing at the Frankfurt Opera Hall. We will pay you this much and we will fly you here on this date. Are you available? I'm like, well, this is fake. This isn't real. And I had the manager I was working with at the time look into it, and they were very much real. It was very much a real scenario, uh, and they had researched they have property in Nova Scotia, and so they have a connection to that area, and so they had researched this East Coast Music Association that I am a part of, where all artists from East Coast of Canada will be on a database, and there's awards and these kind of things. And so they had gone through every artist on that website and listened to a sample of every singer until they found the person that they wanted for their specific performance. And I guess it was me, and they flew me to Frankfurt that year. Um, and they had a small village called Neustadt in I think it was near Mannheim. I'm not very good with geography within Germany. It was very quick, and I was flown over without knowing anyone, and sang with a string section and a choir and musicians from all over the world. It was very interesting. So that was my first trip, and then I was flown over again 2 years later for the same performance. That time was in Mannheim, and then got to experience some of Paris and Nice on my own afterwards as a little vacation. All because I was so lucky to have this gig out of
Mhm.
nowhere. And then this last year, well, as I said, I chose love. I decided that I would keep my online teaching, and take advantage while I could. Who knows? Who knows with how uncertain life is right now, how long virtual training will last? But I wanted to take advantage of it, and so when we knew that James is my partner, when we knew that James was going to lose his visa or it would run out, we decided that his love of traveling would be explored more before he ended up going home and I go with him. And so I love to travel, and so it worked out well. We sold everything we owned. Uh, I organized, and I love to plan. So I organized and planned basically a tour of where we were going to live and work in multiple countries. And we started out with 4 months through Mexico, which I trial by fire is going to Mexico City first when you haven't traveled for years. 9 million people in one small city right away. Uh, I shouldn't say small, one large city of 9 million people. And so we traveled through there. And eventually, after we had left Mexico, we went to Portugal first. And that was the first time I had ever seen that far, I guess that close to myself, the closest possible European country I could have to Nova Scotia. But Portugal was beautiful, it was stunning. And the music was incredible. I got to experience fado. Have you ever heard it?
No, tell me about it.
It's uh it's a beautiful music originally from Portugal. I'm not sure if it's Lisbon specific, but it is Portuguese. And it is just the most hauntingly stunning, beautiful music of the people of actually usually of the poorer communities of Portugal, singing about what they're dealing with. And so it's very much folk based, and their struggle, their trials, and it is it is beautifully sad. Uh, and we got to experience it while sitting in this small. I don't know what the right word would be. I guess tavern. That's not the right word. I'm not sure what it would be called in Lisbon, but this small little pub where it would have been originally performed with one guitar, and it's a specific fado guitar, and one voice in an acoustic setting, no mics, just 10 feet from your face. It was stunning. So that was my first experience in Europe for this trip. We spent 6 weeks in Lisbon.
Hmm. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was great. The weather was wonderful. I know
Mhm.
you don't like the heat, but I was chasing the sun the whole way.
Yeah, it's understandable because as Canadians, you don't get to experience the sun all too much.
Amen.
Mhm.
Amen. That's it. Most of the East Coast kind of stops doing anything for 2 months because it's the only time we get heat
Mhm.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm originally from Vietnam, so we have plenty of sun over there.
I bet. Oh my gosh, amazing.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's on my list.
Yeah. You should go sometimes. It's closer to New Zealand than Canada is.
Yes, we discussed this, that when we're living on that side, that we'll start to be able to explore more of that side. I'm very excited.
Hmm. Yeah. It's a wonderful place to travel and to visit. Okay. So
When
yeah.
was the last time you were in? Oh, sorry. I think I'm glitching a little bit. There we go.
Right.
I was just going
So
to ask you, when was the last time you were there?
in Vietnam, last year.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So
Um,
you travel quite a bit as well.
mhm. Yeah, I'm currently in Hungary, so I'm sure a place in Europe where you can visit is we'd be glad to have you here.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. I actually got to know you from another guest that I interviewed on this podcast, Nicole Ariana. I don't know if you know her.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I do know her. Yes.
Yeah.
We actually
She's
went to this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's fine. She's from Nova Scotia as well, right?
She is, yes. And it's so small. The she is living in Halifax as well, and the city is so small that she actually lives in the downstairs flat of the house that I lived in at one point as well. Like we both have lived in the same address.
That's cool.
A very small world. Actually, we went to the same music school at different times.
Hmm. That's fun. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember having a very fun conversation with her too. We talk about everything music related.
Wonderful. She's very knowledgeable.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it's amazing.
she's got a lot more experience in the industry side of things than I do. She's worked with a lot of professionals on that industry side and knows so she's such a wealth of knowledge with those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that said, I'd like to hear you talk about your career as a session musician.
Sure. Well, when I first started, so I went to the same music college as Nicole did. I remember when talking to the faculty because I was one of the older students in the program at the time, and I didn't have enough money for a university degree for music. And the thing that interested me about this college program was that it was run with jazz theory in mind. It was run with uh, artistry in mind. So it was teaching you how to write grants. It was teaching you how to work within the scene. It wasn't just your performance. And so I found the faculty to be very interesting and some of them close to my age because they were young jazz artists working in the city. Uh, and I was very lucky at that time. I was very motivated. And I started getting gigs with the teachers. That's the way that I pushed myself to be out. I was a very anxious person, so it took a lot for me to be okay pushing myself into that kind of scene. I have a lot of trouble with social anxiety, and uh, uh, not that I don't have a problem talking to you now, but at one point I was a very shy person. And so with these teachers, they would get us out performing in clubs that they performed in restaurants, pubs, all of these things. And so I was lucky enough with one of my teachers that he invited me to it was his 30th birthday party, and most of the musicians in the city were going to be there. And I remember him saying, go up and perform and see if you can meet some of them. And so I got up, I had forced myself up, very, very shy. I got up and sang, and I think I sang an Etta James song. And it was a song that I know it is two chords. You can always explain it to a musician. It's one of the easiest. It's I'd Rather Go Blind. It is A, B minor, B minor, A, back and forth the whole time. And then the singer has the option to do whatever they want with it, right? So I got up and sang. And I think a week later, I got a call, my first call for um, a show where I was to put together a certain roster of themed music for a show. And then that led me to meeting a few other people that wanted me to maybe sing on their record. And then I started taking anything. I there are some things nobody will hear. I took every gig I possibly could. I sang experimental jazz with some people where they would get me to they would have a melody in mind on a guitar and then they're like just try and mimic it with your voice, which if you know the range of a guitar is almost physically impossible. So some of the sounds that came out were hilarious to say the least, but that's what they wanted. They wanted something interesting. And so I have done that. Uh I have sang hooks for rap shows. I have sung, there we go. Jesus. I have sung uh I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. Backing vocals for a metal band, as best as you could say backing vocals. I have been a chainsaw on another record for a friend. where the producer and I were this far away from each other around a microphone, just making chainsaw sounds back and forth and like screeching sounds. Uh, I have done. Some man was putting together a proposal for a musical that he was writing, and he wanted me to come in cold. I had no idea what I was getting into. He gave me a script and he said, I want you to be every character. This was handwritten. I couldn't read his writing, and he didn't have any melodies written out for me. He was singing them to me, but he didn't exactly know how he wanted them sung. And so I had to come up with a character and guess the melody and the lyrics for the most part for about 3 hours. um, I have I've done a lot of weird, exciting, fun things I wouldn't take back, but I've also been a part of some very interesting uh, I've been the backgrounds of a gospel group for, not that I am a gospel singer, but I was very lucky to be hired in as a bit of a gospel background for a roots record. And I've been hired to sing, to fill in for people, to sing with Symphony Nova Scotia as a backup singer for a very nice man named David Miles, who performs quite a bit in the Maritimes. Uh, it's a varied list, but it's all very local, right? Aside from the session work with the Germans, that sounds weird. From my German clients, it's been very Canadian specific.
That's that's amazing. Yeah.
I'm very lucky, and I'm
Mhm.
hoping with the virtual kind of career that I am cultivating, I'm hoping now that I'm traveling less, or that there's one main destination left, that I can start to find resources for more session work virtually, like offering recorded
Mhm.
parts for people on their records. Or I'd love to get into voice acting.
Yeah. Mhm.
Be so fun.
Mhm. Yeah, could be something that you can do while you're in New Zealand. Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
Mhm. Right. So when did you decide that you would like to record some music of your own as well?
Ooh, okay. I will say, for me, creating is harder than I've always considered myself more of a performer, more of a tradesman, I guess, so to speak, than an artist. Though I know whenever I finally do create, I'm very happy that I've done it. But it's a hard process for me. I don't always let myself be as creative as I think I could be. And when I was in music school, the friend, the teacher friend that I performed at his birthday, he produced my first record, and he said, "We're going to make one." Basically, they didn't have a choice. Um, and I didn't know how to write. I'd never really let myself explore that side of myself. So my first record, which is not on any streaming services anymore, my first record is a little rough. Uh, it's a time capsule for me now, but it would have been my last year of school. So 2011, I would have been 24, 25. Do I know my age? My God. And so it was a very rough DIY. It wasn't a studio. I loved it. Was a very local studio, and my producer was very helpful. Luckily, he's one of those people that can play 15 instruments better than anyone can play their one instrument. He's one of those people. And so he was very kind and helped play all of the instruments that I might have been missing. I had a friend who did become my writing partner for quite a while, named Adrian. He was a guitarist, and we wrote together. Our styles were very different, which was good. It was a nice contrast to have. It was a good challenge. Uh, and so the record's very eclectic. I will say that it was it was that record and learning how to do it that started to help me realize that if I actually let myself refine that, if I actually let myself work on it, that over time I will be much more proud of the work that I create. I know that sounds pretty self-depreciating, but it was a very interesting first experience with my own writing.
Mhm. Can we still listen to that record now?
Yes, it does exist. If you go to, there's a free music, I don't know if it's a for, I don't know the right word, but it's called bandcamp.com, and it's where people can post their music for free as opposed to a streaming service. And so my last record and singles are on all streaming services like Spotify, Apple, all the things. But if you go to jessiebrown.bandcamp.com, you can hear all of my older records as well. My first one, and then the second one that I did in Nashville, actually, Tennessee.
Mhm. Oh, okay. So what was it like recording in Nashville?
It was very cool. It's the same producer. So the man that I said that can play any instrument ended up being so good that he started being a session musician in Nashville. Moved to the States, toured with, there was a very, very, very popular band in the States named Deer Tick that he was playing with at that time. And so my guitarist slash co-writer Adrian and I crowdfunded and made it to Nashville to record a record. Uh, and it's not very often you go to Nashville to not record country. I'm not a country act, though there is another Jessie Brown in the States that sings country, and I have gotten some of her emails in the past. I apologize, Jessie, wherever you are. Um, but it was it was fascinating. I mean, there's so much music in such a small strip, and obviously East Nashville. There's more than just that main strip, but there's so many amazing musicians in that small area. It's a little daunting. We went to see some of his name is Rob, my producer at the time. We went to see some of his favorite bars and where some of his favorite session players would play, and they're playing for tips. They're just they're just in there on a Thursday night playing better than anyone I've ever seen. And they're just playing for tips. And I remember one of them saying, "What does ATM stand for?" Like with the accent. They're like, "Appreciate the musicians," and then passing around a jug for change. Wild. Uh, so it was a very inspiring experience. I got to meet some very cool musicians. And some people that were just hanging out in the bars, like the show that I went to, a place called the Basement. It was Paul Simon's drummer playing with Johnny Cash's old bassist and a few other, and they were just jamming. They were just hanging out. um, and then one of the other places we went called Roberts on the Strip, which was a very old school bar restaurant that served cheeseburgers, but also had a great band at the front. Some of Jack White's band was hanging out there on their Thanksgiving, just having drinks, letting loose for their vacation. And so it's just being surrounded by that many musicians is quite inspiring when you don't necessarily feel like, I guess at that point, because of how small of a town I was in and where I was in my career, I didn't feel like I'd ever get to that place. And I think all of us, most, I shouldn't say all of us, I think a lot of musicians deal with imposter syndrome. And so at that point, seeing all of these people at a level that I dreamed of was very inspiring.
Mhm. So I just went over the your Bandcamp website,
Oh, you
and
found it!
yeah, yeah, I'm actually pretty familiar with Bandcamp. It's a good place to find indie music,
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
and so I found that your latest song is a single titled "Novelty,"
Yes.
and I actually listened to it on Spotify, and it was a fun song. I like it quite a bit.
Oh, I'm glad.
So tell me about the song.
Okay. So that was a pandemic project. I had written a few songs. I actually have another one. What did they say? In the can. I have another one ready for when I decide to release it. But um, that was one of two songs that I recorded over the pandemic for the first time without being in a studio. And I will say, I love a studio. It's very comforting to be in one, especially as someone that has been fortunate enough to be a session singer for so many people. Like I feel very comfortable in a studio, and this was the first time that it was done in an apartment. in the pandemic with many roommates and not much control over sound quality and all of those things. And so I was very lucky. A friend of mine, Andrew Wiseman, if you ever get a chance to check him out, he is incredible. Um, he is he is a producer extraordinaire. And my last record, he mixed it for me. He wasn't the producer, but he was the mixing engineer, and he made that record so polished for something that was so low budget. And so we decided to work together. He is so great at pop and more kind of electronic music. And I wanted to try that style. I hadn't really experienced it myself, even though I am a big lover of pop. And so I sent him two of the songs, and it was just me and a piano, and asked him, if you could do anything to this, what would you do? And so we started to discuss influences. I was explaining my love for some, we both share a love of Kimbra, New Zealand, James Blake, um, St. Vincent, artists that are doing a lot of interesting things with electronic influences. Not that St. Vincent hasn't had every influence at this point, but I think at that point he was living in Denmark. I was in Toronto in his old apartment, small world again. Uh, and we just sent files back and forth all the time. He would say, and he, once again, is a producer. I was very lucky that even though he's on a completely different time zone, he's in another country, he's able to record bass parts. He was able to, he's a unbelievable drummer. He did a lot of the drum parts. He helped produce um, all of the electronic elements that, you know, when you're, it's so nice to have someone when you're translating something where I don't necessarily know the vocabulary yet for what I'm asking for. So I'll just sing something to him and he'll translate it into what he hears for that. And so it was an interesting process. Also, at that point, I was still learning how to use technology, and so when it was my turn to redo the actual vocals on my, which he helped me pick out my microphone here, uh, he had to Zoom coach me on how to use the DAW system, Logic, to record my vocals properly. So I'm standing in this I made a vocal booth out of a clothing drying rack and quilts, standing in this little tent with my microphone and him going, okay, these are the buttons. This is where we want all these settings to be. Try it again. And so it was a very interesting process for me, but he was great. And everything was done in-house, so to speak. And then he was able to mix. I sent it off to another friend to be mastered. And then it was kind of I waited. I sat on it for a while because of the lockdowns and the pandemic. I just had no idea how one would release a song anymore. It was such a weird new world for music. And so I sat on it for quite a while. I think it wasn't until 2022 that I released it kind of as a present to myself. I did a music video with a great director from Toronto who she had just moved to Nova Scotia as well. And I was really looking for either, I was really looking for a feminine eye for the video. And so I was very lucky to work with her and released it in the fall of 2022. It would have been late summer, early fall, and then treated myself before I moved away to a very large band of my favorite other friend session players in the city. I think it was an 8-piece band. And I sold out a bar called the Carlton that always has wonderful sound. And it was the first time where I got to have all of these musicians play my music. I was so used to being a tiny trio. I all of a sudden had this 8-piece band of my music that was able to translate these bigger arrangements into something so wonderful that it was something that I will not forget for quite a while, and I could not afford again for quite a while.
This
But
one.
yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that was the answer you wanted. That was quite long.
No, it's okay. It's what I wanted and more, so to speak.
Oh, good.
So as you've alluded to earlier, do you plan on recording and releasing new music of your own?
Oh yes, 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 yes. I found while we were traveling, uh, I was teaching, like I said the whole time. I was practicing. Um, I was prepping for more gigs in Germany at the time that ended up being canceled, unfortunately. But um, I wasn't feeling. I think there was too much demand on the part of my brain that needed to be creative towards understanding language because I tried to learn at least a passable amount of language in every country we went to. Um, I was so devoted to other parts of my life that I just didn't feel creative in a writing way. And so I talked to one artist, and they kind of alluded to, this is your intake period. So seeing all of these things, absorbing all of this culture, learning all of these things about like local people that I would meet, trying to learn the language, trying to understand. I guess I'm going to say cultural norms again, but like I wanted to learn as much as I could while I was away, and I didn't want to be that tourist that just kind of takes over and doesn't really exist in the space they're in. Uh, and so I didn't feel like I could write. And now that I've been home, now that I've been home for about 2 months, I have been writing again, which has been quite nice. I feel like I finally had time to process and reflect. And I think that's important for my process because I am so slow. I'm very slow with writing. And so I've had all of this time to take in all of this information. And now I'm just starting to sort everything, the Rolodex in my head, you know? And so I've started writing and I've started taking recording lessons online with my last producer, John Epworth. If you ever get a chance to listen to anyone, listen to John Epworth. He is just, I look up to him so much as a writer. And so he has been teaching me recording so that my goal when I get to New Zealand and can finally settle and have some real instruments again, um, that I'll be able to record my own record. I think that's my next goal.
Yeah, I look forward to having you on the show again when New Zealand happens.
Oh,
The
that's
record
kind.
happens. Yeah, it's should be fun.
God, I hope so. I think it'll be a blast. I'm really hoping so.
So with your move to New Zealand, what would be something that you miss most and least about Canada?
Ooh, ooh, good question. Miss most, obviously, my family and friends. I think I'm gonna miss the most. I know that's probably a cop out answer, but it's the other side of the world. It's not just a quick flight home from Toronto, and so when I plan to come home, it's both expensive and long. I think it's a 21-hour flight in total.
Mhm.
Um, something crazy like that. One of my flights is 14 hours. Uh, and so I'm gonna miss the family and friends that I have here. Um, I'm gonna miss something called garlic fingers, which are so specific to not only Canada but East Coast Canada. They're not really even in Toronto, but it's a horrible, heartburn-inducing, delicious take on a pizza that is just garlic bread with this donair sauce, this sweet sauce. This is so gross, made of condensed milk and sugar. And it's just something that we eat at 2 a.m. when we're making bad decisions. But I will miss that food dearly. It's kind of like poutine, you know? I'm not a huge poutine eater, but I'm sure I'll miss it when I can't have it. Or if I do have it, it won't be with curds. It'll be with shredded cheese because they don't make it right. Uh, what I will miss the least? Probably the weather. I will say, even this last year, like I got to live throughout Mexico through the winter. I got to live in Portugal in the spring. I got to live in France, Italy. All of these places are just beautifully warm when I was there. Chase the sun. They call them snowbirds here. Uh, but I joke that I am like a lizard in a heat lamp. Like I need warmth to stay alive. I guess we all do, so to speak, but I cannot produce my own body heat. So I will not miss the snow. Though I know if I want to see it, I can go to the mountains in New Zealand and find it. So at least I know it's not far.
I I was in Canada for 4 years studying as an undergraduate.
Really?
Yeah.
Where were you?
Peterborough, Ontario.
No way! I have played Peterborough. I
Oh,
have
really?
friends in Peterborough. Oh, actually, they just left, but I had friends in Peterborough. That's so cool.
Mhm.
Did you hang out at the Spill?
Uh, Once in a while.
Yeah.
I think the place closed when I got there, so I think
Oh
I didn't have a
no.
chance to. No.
Oh my God. That's so cool. Did you like Ontario?
Um, except for when it's winter.
Yes. It's very cold there. I will
And
say too that Ontario is colder than Nova Scotia. Like I because we live so
really?
close to the ocean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, because we live close to the ocean, we always had a milder winter, but we had a lot more precipitation, and so it was always covered in ice. The amount of times that I have fallen down the hills of Halifax in the ice, ridiculous. And so I was kind of excited to have a cold winter in Ontario where I knew I wouldn't fall over the entire time.
Yeah, I think I've fallen over because of the ice at least twice while I was there.
Oh no. Oh, you poor thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
but I'll miss the poutine as well. I You cannot have it anywhere. I don't think.
it's not the same, is
Hmm. Yeah.
it? Did you have any other favorite things about Canada when you were there?
I did make a lot of friends while I was there and after I left because of this show, and I would like to meet them at some point. So that's cool.
Mhm. That's awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, and Ottawa is
Yeah.
always nice when I visit it. Yeah.
Very clean.
Hmm. Yeah.
Spotless. I guess it has to be. Um, we had uh I had one show there at it was a famous bar, but I did not have luck playing there. I think it was called Zaphod's Beetlebox. Zaphod, something like that. This was a few years ago now. But we played to the other band. It was one of those nights where it's just like the luck of the draw. And I was a touring at that point. I was a rock band with very little funding for marketing, and I just did not do well in Ottawa. I wish I would have had another chance to go. But yeah, we played to the other band. They were very nice. Thank God. But Ottawa's very nice. Yeah.
Mhm. Right. So, tell me more about your work as a vocal coach.
Okay. Well, I started out. I, it goes back quite a ways. When I was young, I was lucky enough that I took piano lessons from a very young age, probably 6, I think, and I was in music for young children before that. My parents were very kind and put me in lessons at a very young age. And so by the time I was in high school, I started teaching the local kids in the neighborhood piano as my part-time job. And so at that point, I think I had as far as conservatory goes, I was up to my level 8, uh, and so I could teach, and so I was teaching little kids in my grad year to have some extra cash for the weekends. And I loved teaching, and I knew the model because I had taken lessons for so long that I kind of studied being the teacher. Uh, and when I got older, I had paused on teaching for piano. I developed a little bit of carpal tunnel in my, I think when I was going for my grade 9 exam. And so my piano career at that point, I thought it was over. I was originally going to try and go to university for piano, and my hands were so little. I ended up hurting them with bad technique, uh, and so I took a pause on that and became over time became a karaoke host of all things. Uh, and I was living in Moncton, New Brunswick, which was very like the bars that I was a karaoke host at were pretty rough. And so eventually I decided to go to music school, and then I moved back to Nova Scotia and went to music school there. And by my second year, my voice teacher, Erin Costello at the time, wanted to give me her spot at Long and McQuaid, which I don't know if you're familiar from Ontario, but Long and McQuaid's like a very
It's a
large.
music shop, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a Canada wide music store, and usually, aside from I think the major Toronto center has a school attached to it usually, and so lots of musicians in the city will work at Long and McQuaid teaching part time with whatever careers they have or gigs they have, and so she was giving me her spot. And so I wasn't even done music school, and she was like, "Jessie, of course you're going to teach here. Just come in." And so I had to do an audition, and I sang and played for the director at the time, and I started teaching 2 days a week while I was still going to music college. And then when I graduated the next school year, I started full time, and within, my God, I think I taught at Long McQuaid for 10 years, uh, maybe 9 years, and I was teaching probably 50 students a week. And that was both piano and voice at the time. I only taught to a certain level of piano. I didn't feel confident teaching advanced piano students. Uh, Piano wasn't really my big love anymore, and so I didn't have the same drive to commit to piano that I did for my voice. And so eventually I started to have a wait list. I was very lucky. I was teaching 5 days a week, 10 students a day. I was exhausted, um, but I loved it. I loved it. I got to know so many students, uh, and I learned so much about teaching from teaching.
Mhm.
I know that sounds like a cliche, but I was I found I was so grateful for the amount I learned about, more so about human emotion in learning, like understanding how people feel when they're learning, and figuring out how to make people feel the most comfortable they can to learn. Because it's not always just about how good you are, it's how you feel to be good enough. All of those things matter, especially when it comes to voice. It's such a vulnerable instrument. And so a lot of times, half of the beginning of vocal coaching I find is helping people be comfortable with themselves enough that they feel comfortable to use their voice. And there's a lot of things that go into making sure that you feel comfortable having a voice. And so I think a lot of my teaching over time became centered around confidence, more so. Obviously technique matters. I taught a lot of technique in those things, but it was more about making sure that people felt safe to learn. And then I started being able to teach a lot of artists in the city. This is in Halifax. I worked with a lot of artists as they prep for records. I worked with a lot of artists as they prep for showcases. If something didn't feel right in the way they were performing, we'd work on um, what physically was going on. It was it was really great. I even eventually started going into the studio sometimes with them to help them through a recording process because I loved it there so much. I was like, of course I'll come in. Um, and so I was very interested uh, in a certain pedagogy, and it is called somatic voice work. It is based out of Baldwin University I forget where in the States, but one of my colleagues slash teacher, she became one of my teachers. Um, she helped, I guess, so to speak, nurse me back to health when I got sick for a little while and I couldn't sing. And she had trained in this pedagogy, and it was all about how the body, basically how to be in touch with your body to produce sound, more so than just the typical do these exercises and your voice will get better. It wasn't a one size fits all. And so I could not afford at the time. I was so invested in I was so invested at the time in affording to write my music, affording to record it, affording to promote it, affording to tour it. All of those things are unbelievably expensive, and so I couldn't upgrade my career at the time. And so when the pandemic came, they finally offered that program online, and I did the pedagogy course, all three modules in a row, uh, in my little tiny Toronto apartment. My roommates called it Straw and Cork School, and I learned so much about how the body works, why sounds are produced the way they are. Um, it was just such a refreshing way to learn voice. It wasn't about stylistic parameters, though they did teach that. It wasn't about the right way to sing. It was all about how to make the body free of tension so that you can produce sound. I loved that aspect of it, and so now my teaching is has widely uh, grown. I would say it's very different from how it was, where now I'm just helping people kind of find comfort in their bodies and find ways to produce sounds that they want in a healthy way without feeling like they have to sound a certain way. And now I have clients. I have some in the UK. I have some clients still in Toronto. I have some clients in the States. I had one in France for a little while. Um, I'm very lucky to have a roster, so to speak, of multi-country. I don't know the right. Wow, I'm gonna lose my vocabulary here. I am very lucky to have the roster that I have because it is global, and I'm hoping that I can start to grow that in New Zealand. Luckily, the time zones will make sense. Luckily, I can make it work.
Yeah, I believe the word you're looking for is international.
Thank you. That is the word. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, is it a fully online operation now, or are you still
It
taking in person? Oh, fully
fully
online.
online. Yeah, and
Wow.
it's mostly because I don't know where I'm living. For the last for a little while, I've been everywhere. I've been so many places, and I'm very fortunate that I have, but there's just no place that I can settle enough that I would have people start to come in to my space. I'll also say that because the business of singing is so spitty, um, I haven't gotten sick nearly as much since I started doing virtual learning. But my roster is so international that with time zones and all of those things, it's just easier for me to keep everything in one streamlined online business. I
Mhm.
love it.
That's cool. Yeah. So I'm currently studying now, but I'm also tutoring English.
Cool.
Most of my students are Vietnamese people who wants to speak English as a second language, and
Nice.
for the most part, I find that teaching in person is a better experience because internet connection is not always reliable.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, it can be. It's been challenging. There's been times when, power goes out for certain places, weather is not right.
Mhm.
Internet connections aren't as strong or somebody's device is acting up. Those
Yeah.
things are definitely part of the internet game, I suppose.
Mhm.
But I will say most of the clients I have prefer it. And I have had some people inquire and choose not to because they prefer in person, and I totally respect it. I totally understand. It is much more there's a lot more connection that can happen when you are in person. I get that. But a lot of them like the convenience of it, right? Like a lot of these clients I wouldn't be able to have anymore. Uh, Depending on where they moved, I wouldn't be able to see them. There's a lot of connection I've built with these clients, and they like the convenience of being able to sit in their PJs if they want to, or not have to pay for commute to wherever they're going. It's just depends on people's preferences, but I love it.
It's nice. Yeah. I think virtually all of my podcast episodes are done online actually.
Hmm.
It's I think I've done like maybe upwards of 200 of them thus far.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That
yeah, I've been doing it for 3 years, so I think the numbers add up, right?
Oh, that's incredible. That's a lot of conversations.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And yeah, a lot of Zoom hours too. Yeah, and
Yeah. I bet.
virtually all of them, I have to do them online. I think of the 200, there may be five of them that I do in person. Some of them I would send Canada,
Hmm.
but yeah, for the most part, it's Zoom all the way.
Hell yeah. I love that. Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky. I'll say you and we're very lucky that we can do this now. I'm very grateful. I've done a lot of work to get to the point where I can do this online, and I'm very grateful that we can. Like, technology is wonderful for now. Technology is wonderful now. Put on my tinfoil hat, and maybe you won't agree in a couple years when AI takes over. But for now, it's done us a world of good during such a weird time.
Mhm. Yeah, so I wonder if since we're both busy people, I assume, how do you find meaning and joy in the work that you do?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I I will say to put it mildly, I'm an emotional person. And so I derive a lot of meaning from emotional connections with people. And so even if that means professionally, in a medium that can be quite vulnerable, and a medium that can be quite emotional in itself, I do love with teaching that I am able to help people find their voices. I am able to help people prepare for major life things if they're an artist. I'm very fortunate I get to be a part of such a vulnerable thing for people. With my writing, with performing, it's always been therapy for me. I think ever since I was young, I didn't let anyone hear me sing until I was until I was much older. I was too shy, I was very very shy, and so for me, it was a therapeutic thing that I did alone. Uh, I always had music. Music was always the thing that made me feel better. Uh, it's always been a way to connect with people, even when I don't know how to otherwise.
I think that actually answered my final question, which I reserved for all musicians, which is what does music mean to you? But
Oh.
I think we've already answered that. But I think I we can substitute it in some ways. To what extent do you find music to be a connector between people?
Oh. Oh. Well, I think that I think I've only met maybe four people in my life that said I don't like music.
Hmm.
Maybe four, and I was shocked. It's like not even a little bit, not even one jingle, you know. Uh, but I do think that it's one of those mediums. It's one of those artistic mediums that everyone, whether they realize it or not, has access to. I think sometimes people tend to think that they don't understand fine arts. Maybe they don't have as much access to dance, or they don't have as much access um, to actual, I should say, fine art, as in painting, drawing, those kind of things. Uh, we hear music all the time, and it's one of those things where people going to concerts because they share a love of a specific band, people going to um, camps and things and singing songs together, campfires, people getting together at parties and dancing or whatever they're going to do at the party to music. Those things, even if you're not a performer, those things are important. People will remember things, uh, with musical memories, I think, a lot of times, even if they don't necessarily realize that that's the extent of oh my god, I'm rambling now. Anyway, what I was going to say is, as a musician, I think I have had the ability to connect with so many other artists through music by just trying to understand their version of it, if that makes sense. Like listening to other musicians in a practice scenario or jam room, depending on what kind of music you're doing, and hearing the language and how everybody expresses it, even if someone is highly theoretical and has studied and trained, say, classical theory, and then someone else is a jazz theory background. Someone else has no idea what they're playing, but their ear is so strong that they can play whatever they want. Some people that just appreciate it and want to learn. When you are conveying that to each other, there is always a way to find that language and play together. There's always a way to at least connect on some level because you love the music together. I don't know if that answers it, but yes, I do think it does connect people.
Well, on that wonderful note, thank you very much, Jessie Brown,
Thank you.
for joining this show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, best of luck with your move.
Thank you.